Those of you who've been in the class before know that I always show a picture like this at the very beginning. This time I happened to have found one in a museum. I took a European art trip last spring. And the reason I show a picture like this is to say this is not what the class is going to look like. We're not going to be dwelling on all of these very classic looking masterpieces. It's not a formal art class. All I want to do is share my passion for looking at art. I'm not a professional art scholar, artist, curator, anything like that. I just love to look at art. I love to learn about art, and I love to share it with you. Look at this picture while I'm talking. It is a typical museum, probably sometime in the 19th century. And as I've been talking, perhaps you've been looking it over and saying, that's not the kind of art I like. And if you were going through a museum, you might sort of like ignore this gallery. Let's look at a close-up of that picture. The picture in close-up is just what you might have expected, but it is a storytelling picture. In the bottom left, there is an artist at his easel painting a lovely lady. The lovely lady's lover is Alexander the Great, who has commissioned this painting. According to legend, he was so in love with the painting that he traded his lover to the artist for the painting. In other words, Alexander shows art above nature. Well, I'm not asking you to do that. Just sit back and enjoy the rest of the class. But look at the painting down in the lower right-hand corner. It's different, sort of, in its look. And it's one that I've had in classes before. So I'd like to look at a close-up of that. The picture is called The Money Changer and his wife. They exchange money for people's goodies. You can see here the couple who are examining the goodies that somebody's brought in to have them traded. So do you see the guy that brought in the goodies? Well, you see that in the close-up in the right-hand frame. This is the mirror that's in the front of the picture. It's reflecting the man that's brought in the goodies and the whole world outside. So it's kind of a magic mirror. Here's another magic mirror. Sometimes I won't tell you right away who the artist is because I know the artist is so popular, and because it's fun to do guessing games, I always tell you right soon. Here the artist is looking into a magic ball. His whole room is reflected, and he's done a self-portrait. Artists make magic. This is by the same artist. A hand creating a hand, creating a hand. They start with just a blank canvas, just a piece of paper, or a big block of marble, and from them the masterpieces come. That artist is M.C. Escher, Dutchman. He has a museum in The Hague. You'll notice the picture that is hanging on the front of the museum, one of his most famous and one of his most fun pictures. It's on the right. And you see here the exact same landscape on the left and on the right. It's that village and the river. On the left, you see it at the day. On the right, you see it at night. Then you see the geese that are flying toward the village. Are they flying toward the right, or are they flying toward the left? The white ones are flying toward the right. Did you see in the negative space the black ones that are flying toward the left? This is more magic from M.C. Escher. Here is his eye. In this eye, you will see what we call in art a memento mori, which is a reminder that eventually we're all going to leave this mortal coil. We're all going to leave our human lives. So I think I've given an idea of what our theme is for today. The reason I use themes is that this is not an art course that goes artist by artist. It doesn't go artist school or era by artist school and era. What we concentrate on is the works themselves. So I gather them around themes, none of which I'm an expert at. I'm not an expert at magic, myth, or metaphysics, but it gives me a way to group the art and help you make connections. We're going to start with one symbolist artist. We'll look at another one later on. But I want to talk about just a little bit about this school of art that led to the surrealists. They were dedicated to the imagination and painted dreamlike images drawn from mythology, the Bible, and other literary sources, as well as just their individual fantasy. That's why there aren't always answers to the question, what's this thing about? By the way, this is by an artist we're going to talk about in a minute that I didn't give the name of because I wanted to surprise you. It is called Mystery. I don't know what the mystery is. None of the analyses I looked at know what the mystery is. She is looking sort of fun out. He's a master of color, often using pastels. And we get this sort of mysterious feeling around her. Well, that artist is Orlando Redon. He is weird in the good way. I kind of like weird. He had a whole series, which unlike the flower picture we just saw, which before I researched, I thought that was all he was about, called his noirs. They are drawings like this wonderful eye balloon you see on the left here. He dedicated that series to another weird guy who also specialized in the occult and the mysteries. Very popular now on Netflix with The Fall of the House of Usher, and on PBS where they've been reading Edgar Allan Poe. What Redon said in his dedication to Poe, the eye, like a strange balloon, mounts toward infinity. Well, infinity is kind of a magic thing. And it, to some cynics, say all you see is what you get. Others say there is something strange beyond. I ran into a painting on my trips through museums last summer that blew me away. I had no idea that Redon did this painting. So I'd like to show you a short clip from a video. We don't have time for the full videos, and I'm going to put them on my website, which I'll tell you more about later. So Leslie, could we show that first video?
When I first saw this painting, I chuckled. It's probably one of the weirdest paintings of the beginning of the 20th century. Let me explain why that is. It's just so strange and weird. I mean, the painting is beautiful. The way the colors all mix both chaotically and somehow harmoniously is absolutely stunning. The peacefulness of the blue sky brings out the flamboyant ground. It's so tumultuous that you might run the risk of not even seeing the nude woman laying in the storm. It's almost abstract, and I find it absolutely beautiful. But there's a catch. I didn't show you the whole picture. Odilon Redon, the artist who painted this masterpiece, painted a cyclops right in the center of his work. And it's one creepy cyclops. His single oversized eye is disturbingly staring at the viewer. But though he's supposed to be a man-eating monster, the cyclops seems appeased by the scenery. His head is slightly tilted to the right, and it almost looks as if he's smiling. My first impression was, strangely enough, that he was in love, but that would be absurd, right? Well, not completely. The myth this is depicting is the story of Polyphemus, a cyclops known for his ruthless violence, who falls in love with the naiad Galatea. It's a wonderful story about how even the cruelest of monsters still longs for love and acceptance. Odilon Redon is doing something pretty important here. He's making us want to accept this shy giant timidly hiding behind rocks, peeking out and dreaming of a world where he would be loved. That's not how Polyphemus is usually depicted. it's often hard to sympathize with him. For example, in Gustave Moreau's Galatea, the focus of this representation is on Galatea. Moreau depicts her flawless skin and her long, blonde hair. Polyphemus, on the other hand, is sitting in the shadows, looking through the vegetation. Unlike in Moreau's depiction, Redon's Cyclops is being, in a way, vulnerable by presumably leaving his hiding spot to peek above the mountains.
I think one important point in that video that I think was interesting to remember is that one of the things we look at in looking at art when we analyze it, or how the critics analyze it, is what was the artist's intention? Same thing as in literature. And was the artist successful? And he's saying that perhaps he wanted to look like a vulnerable kind of a Cyclops. So this is a picture I took for you. It's at the Kroller-Müller Museum. We're going to be talking about it later because it has the most Van Goghs of any collection next to the Van Gogh Museum. And we're going to be talking about Van Gogh in our final class. And I took a close-up because I thought he was so cute. Look at the texture of the painting there. We talk about painters that use different textures and that play with paint as painterly, because if you think about the Renaissance or medieval work, they hid the brush. They don't want to show the artist's hand, but Redon does. And look at that style. And I like this noir too, below the close-up that he did of our cute little Cyclops. Another eye on the right is from, I think, the most popular surrealist. It has those fabulous clouds. I know that when I had talked to the artist who did the cover of my book, I said, give me Magritte clouds. He succeeded. I think they do look like Magritte. What does he mean? What he is saying here is that our eyes don't see all there is. And we all see things differently. So our eyes can play tricks. They can mirror back falsely. Yes, that was Renee Magritte. And I was thrilled to pieces when I arrived in Brussels, where I wanted to go to his museum and a couple of other museums last summer, to see in the airport this fabulous shop. Look at his clouds as the lighting fixtures. You will notice a couple of his most famous works here. I didn't notice until I was actually putting together this slideshow, the sort of surrealistic little anomaly in the lower right-hand corner. There's a girl there going into her own complete world. Probably she's found a plug and she's charging her iPhone, sitting next to this darling little doll. I found it online and I'm going to get one of Magritte's painting up above. Look at the left at Magritte. He was a very bourgeois guy. He'd walk around Brussels in a suit and that bowler hat, walking his dog, just a hometown guy. His paintings are very easy to understand, every single image, but the meanings of them go beyond reality. They are surrealistic. And you might have noticed these two works at the shop. I think they're two of the most famous. Ceci n'est pas une pipe this is not a pipe. Oh no, it's not. It's a picture. It's two-dimensional. Just a bunch of colors on a piece of paper that you're looking at on a screen right now. The Son of Man is a self-portrait. Kind of hard to see the face. Why does he cover the face? Well, he covers the face because he has this feeling that we are all the same outside of our appearances, that we're all connected. He used the title, The Son of Man, and none of the analyses that I looked at of this picture mentioned the fact that the Son of Man is really the name of Jesus, that many people give to him as being the Son of God, but on earth at the same time. So Magritte has his world with one foot, in reality, one foot in the beyond. Look at that right arm. Weird? Did you notice it? The elbow is going backwards. So we're all flawed a little bit, I think. So the Musée Magritte is part of a big complex called the Royal Museums of Belgium. Before they converted the building down in the lower left-hand picture, they had this advertisement for what was to come. They did a rendering of what it'd be like to pull aside the curtains, and this building now will be the Musée Magritte, which had been housed elsewhere. The painting they're revealing is called a nocturne. And I just want to say that right now at the Monterey Museum of Art, they're having a show of nocturnes. Many of them are in our own hometown, so I recommend it. What's weird about the middle picture? If it's a night scene, well, the sky's a day scene. So we have both at the same time. It was the inspiration for the poster for the movie The Exorcist. I love this one, and it so fits into our class today. The clairvoyance of an artist who's able to look at an egg and create what will be hatched from it, like a prophet, like a far seer. The egg has magical qualities. I mean, for heaven's sake, if you really think about the fact that you have this shell, sometimes big ostrich ones, crack it open and a being comes out from it. It's pretty magical. So you'll see the egg traveling through our magic things today. Another really terrific surrealist is Renee Farrington. She was born in England. After her art studies, she went to Paris and got involved with the surrealists there. Marcel Duchamp, Max Ernst, who was her lover. And eventually she went to Spain and emigrated to Mexico, where she spent the last part of her life. This is a fantastic work among many. If you like what you see at all from Renee Farrington, I really recommend looking her up. Here we have on the left what she calls the giantess, which could really be said that it's the goddess, the guardian of the egg, the magical egg. That is some of the magic she has here. Look at her feet. Look at how she's planted in the earth like a mother earth, like a goddess of the earth. Do you see the teeny tiny people below? She's also the goddess of the seas and the boats and the sea life. And up above the skies, look at her hair. Her hair is golden wheat. She creates her own little magic people. This is her necromancer, standing there with that little familiar that is called her little pet magic maker, looks like a monkey. We don't know if this is a boy or a girl necromancer. A necromancer, you can tell by the suffix, is somebody that deals with the dead, being able to communicate with the dead like a medium. There is an egg-shaped vase here. In that, she can do her magic potions. And look at the pyramid. The pyramid also has magic. And the pyramid is a pyramid of eggs. She was friends in Mexico with another terrific surrealist who was Spanish and came to live in Mexico. They had a small surrealist group there. Neither one of these artists are really widely known, but they're very, very important in art history, and they're starting to get more acknowledgement. For example, in one-person shows in museums. I love this magic alchemy machine. I grew up thinking alchemy was to change anything into gold, but it's not. It's really to kind of like change the world. She is sitting there as part of her ground. The linoleum is coming up and turning into her frock. She's turning a wheel with a strap that goes to her magical machine. I can almost feel the steam coming from it, the bells and whistles as she does her magic. And this one certainly fits into our theme. This beautiful alchemist who is a bird. I'm not sure. I haven't found out why she has a violin around her neck, but I think it's fetching. She has an owl type face. She is doing what Escher was doing. She's doing what Magritte did. She's drawing a picture that comes alive. And that bird will fly out the window. Notice the triangle shape of her magic making thing that she has in her hand. But my favorite thing is this robot helper she has made of 2 green martini olives, who has his finger in the 3 primary colors, who is going to help her out. Here are 2 more that deal with magic. I want you to look as I'm talking at what do they have in common. You'll see that in both cases, they look as if they're scared out of their gourd. Their magic making has gone awry. Their memento mori skulls are melting. If you look at the one on the left, the sorceress, she's pointing back to the background. The sculptures in the architecture are coming alive. And that one witch-like is taking a baby out for a sacrifice. Notice that they both have magic books here in order to perform their alchemy. In the one on the right, he has a piece of music. And the lyrics on that music say, "The devil does not jest." Did you see the devil in the painting? It's the claws that are coming at him on the right. Francisco Goya did pictures of witches in order to say that he's very afraid of how superstition is coming back into the Catholic Church, and that they are using fear in order to carry out the work of the church. I use the word chiaroscuro down here at the bottom to say how I used it so beautifully in the one on the left. Chiaroscuro is the dramatic contrast between light and dark. So you see the spotlight on that coven of witches above these very scared guys on the bottom. On the right, you see the devil in the form of an animal in the midst of a coven of witches. This is a nocturne. You see a woman on the right bringing a baby to be sacrificed. The woman on the black underneath that has a baby who has already been sacrificed. That is a skeleton. In the foreground, you see a baby hid underneath the yellow shawl. And on the far left, you see the skeleton of one of the babies that has been sacrificed. David Teniers, Flemish, part of the 17th century revival of fabulous art that came after both the Netherlands that we call it now and Belgium that we call it now. They were all the Netherlands, broke away from Spain and started doing these genre scenes. Now, this isn't a real genre scene. A genre scene is normally happy families getting together and people in pubs having fun. And here we have witches doing witchful things. The one in her cauldron. You see them painting a painting that the church would not approve of. And on the right, the guy who has probably had a spell because he has a rooster on his head. He's sitting on top of some kind of a monster, and it has a skull there for its head. The memento mori skull in the front is sprouting flowers. So this is kind of like witches at home doing what witches do. The idea of witchery, the idea of sinners, is something that has come down through the culture. The good girl, bad girl kind of an idea, really inculcated in us. The art has followed along. Look at the beautiful Madonna on the left by Leonardo da Vinci. By the way, Lita just means that is where the painting hung. And you see the beautiful contemplative face of the Virgin looking down at her son, Jesus, suckling at her breast. He's looking out at us, beckoning us to follow him. As sort of a play on this, you see in the middle picture a woman with a babe, a very large babe, by the way, looking not at us, looking not at all happy, and looking out into perhaps what her future might hold. Do you see what the baby is playing with at her chest? Yes, what I'm doing is doing an homage to Renee Curry's Tackling the Tough Ones class that's coming up soon of the Scarlet Letter. And you see on the right the first scene that illustrates the book where Hester Prynne is standing with her letter in front of the gallows. Speaking of gallows, if you look at the picture in the front, it's very unusual. It's an unusual painter. This is from a show, one among three, now at the Monterey Museum of Art, that tie in perfectly with what we're doing. I thought I died and gone to heaven when I saw what they were showing. They're great shows. Patrice Vecchione, our own Patrice, who has classes here at Ollie, wrote a beautiful article about not only what she saw, but how she saw it, about how she looks at art, which is kind of what I hope I'm helping with in this class. And I'm putting that link to that article on my website. He did his paintings all as if they were like Byzantine icons. An icon just sort of raises the level. He uses halos. He uses black Madonnas. He was a Roman Catholic. He has problems with the Roman Catholic Church. He identifies as black. So his paintings all have messages about those things. Behind the Black Madonna and Child, do you see the gallows? Do you see the shirt that the person on the gallows is wearing? It's a Confederate flag. And Stephen Greenfield is having a comment on this sign that he told me when I went to his lecture makes the hairs on the back of his neck stand out when he sees it. Another series is the halos as well as the Madonnas. You see this in the top plane. Now, I'm not absolutely sure this is at Monterey. I found this picture when I did my research when I came back from the shows, but it's so important because it ties in with our third class. What is toppling here? Well, it is that statue back on its plinth with the Confederate flag. It is a common statue of a rearing horse, which kind of symbolizes triumph, on which sits a Confederate general in triumph, and they're being toppled. The baby here, you might notice, in the Madonna and Child, is holding the memento mori. Perhaps it's a memento mori for Confederate attitudes. I'm not sure. On the right, one of his Halo series. These were historical, real people, and then just some guys he knew that he puts in halos just because. But in the backgrounds, you see kind of like mixed messages. This is St. Moses the Black, and he was a thief and murderer, decided to reform and took on all these religious symbols. What do you see in the background? Something that perhaps Mark Greenfield is thinking akin to the religious symbols, a flying saucer with a person descending. We're going to be talking about descent later. We're now going to be going into monsters, myths, and metaphysics. Oh my. The idea of monsters tied up with metaphysics, which is just trying to understand the world, perhaps through religion, goes all through art, particularly in the Middle Ages, particularly on pictures where you try to scare the parishioners into towing the line, into following the tenets of the church. Look at that marvelous guy on the left. I'd like you to look at his head with the teeth. It's kind of like an alligator sort of teeth kind of a thing. I'm going to be reminding you of that in our third class. Look at the horned beast on the right. And then look at the monsters in the lower right-hand corner. In the front, there's a king. Anybody getting an idea of where this is from? This is not medieval. It's from a movie. It's from the movie of Where the Wild Things Are. One of the many examples of ways that literature and even children's literature, even self-help books, talk about how we need to tame our demons. My demons happen to be my ego, who comes up to me and say, you better be worried about this you did 2 years ago, or you can't really be safe because something might happen. So this is about taming your demons, which is what Max does in Where the Wild Things Are. You see, he becomes the king of them and tames them. That's in that movie clip I have up above. Below that, I have a reminder of the medieval ones. It's the same thing as The Nightmare in the Closet, where the monster is just as afraid as the little boy and ends up in bed with him. And my favorite, the only poem I've ever memorized, The Jabberwocky from Alice Through the Looking Glass. The marvelous Jabberwocky that was created in this version by Graham Bass. Here we have the Jabberwock with the jaws that bite and the claws that catch, and the little boy down here who is going to take his vorpal sword in hand and behead him. He's going to conquer his demons. Joseph Campbell said that one of the things that we want to do in life is to conquer our demons. And we see a lot of them in myths, which we're going to be talking about a little bit. Speaking of demons and things that go bump in the night, let's look at these ghosts of Hokusai. Many people may not know the name Hokusai, an incredibly important world artist, Japanese, but I think almost all of you will recognize the most famous work that he did. It's on t-shirts, it's on mugs, it's all over the place. We're going to look at a little bit of a video, and I'll put the whole thing on my website. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
I'm sure you've seen this image before. It's The Great Wave by Hokusai. It's perhaps the most recognizable piece of Japanese art, from Japan's most famous artist. But around the same time as making this print, Hokusai was also conjuring up strange and frightening ghosts plucked from Japanese folklore. From the story of Oiwa, a possessed lantern who haunts her treacherous husband, to the Kahada Kaheiji, a vengeful corpse that peers over the curtain to watch you sleep. But where did these monsters come from? And why was Hokusai so fixated with ghost stories? All this and more as we step into the ghoulish art of supernatural Japan. Our tale begins in Japan's Edo period, which spanned between the years of 1603 to 1867, a time when the country's rulers restricted contact with the outside world. With such limited foreign influence, art within Japan's borders flourished, particularly a style of wood block printing called ukiyo-e. Images were carved onto a piece of wood, then covered in ink, and then finally pressed onto paper, revealing the image. This method of printing produced some of the most amazing artists and artworks, but arguably the master of ukiyo-e was this man, Katsushika Hokusai. It's believed that Hokusai created 30,000 unique pieces of art, including his famous Hokusai manga, a 13-volume collection of sketches on every topic imaginable. People, animals, plants, mythology, architecture, even self-defense techniques. He also made some stunning landscapes. Can we take a minute to appreciate some of them? By the age of 70, Hokusai was known throughout Japan, but he was yet to have created his most famous work, his 36 views of Mount Fuji. One of them included his masterpiece, Under the Great Wave of Kanagawa. Here, Hokusai depicts a rogue wave as it plunges down onto the boats below. This fearsome and dramatic piece was instantly popular in Japan. In his lifetime, some 5,000 copies were printed, but only a handful of these originals have survived. As he grew into his old age, Hokusai became more and more interested in the supernatural. He spent much of his time making frightening prints of ghosts from folklore, or, as they're referred to in Japan, yokai. Yokai are weird and mysterious beings, eerie apparitions that inhabit supernatural Japan. There's no word in English that accurately conveys the meaning of yokai. In Japanese, the term refers to things that are both strange and beautiful. I can see why. They come in all shapes and sizes, from friendly household spirits to fierce demons. Let me introduce you to some of them now. Up first, there's the Oyajirome with its large bulbous eye on the back of its head, or the Domokomo, a spirit with 2 heads and 2 personalities. What about the fearsome Ushi Oni, 1 part bull, 1 part crab, and the rest nightmare fuel? But my favourite is the Kamakiri, this cheeky bird goblin that goes around cutting long hair. Now, around the time that Hokusai was active, interest in these supernatural yokai had boomed. Trading ghost stories was a favourite pastime, particularly in the game of Hyakumonogatari, where participants would sit in a candlelit room and take turns telling frightening tales. After each one was shared, a candle would be extinguished until there was no light left in the room. It was there that the yokai would appear.
I think you might have seen some parallels in there. You saw a Cyclops, kind of a monster, and it's amazing. The more we look at art, the more that we see all of these connections between Eastern and Western and between different beliefs. This is a show that is now going on at the Asian Art Museum that I'm dying to see. Takashi Murakami is a world famous artist. He's not related to the Japanese novelist. His show is called Unfamiliar People, Swelling of Monsterized Human Ego. That's what I was talking about before, how our ego is what brings the monsters. Well, I'm in love with this monsters. I think you'll see a taste of what we just saw with Hokusai. By the way, you saw those on Hokusai woodblocks. The ukiyo works from Japan greatly influenced the Impressionists. So if you got a feeling of that, you get a feeling of what some of their work was like. Here we have the whole heritage, a modern artist who's bringing us these demons with the heritage of Japan. The ones at the top, they look like they're melted monsters. They're so cute. There's 3 tiers of them, really tiny ones at the bottom and medium-sized ones. I think that in the very middle, there is a monster in the medium tier in a suit that looks a lot like Frankenstein's monster. I think he sort of snuck him in there. Look at that cat. It's terrific. The cat, of course, has another cat on its head covered with a fish with a cat on top and a violin. But there's also lots more going on with the samurai and the dragons, and so much brought into this magnificent mural. I'm dying to see it in San Francisco. I've mentioned Joseph Campbell before. He is now no longer with us. You might have followed the PBS series called The Power of Myth, read some of his other books. His really emphasis is that there is so much that we've lost today from not following the myths, that we're so wrapped up in what we call the real world. He had this interesting quote about the artist. He said, "The role of the artist, I now understood, is that of revealing through the world surfaces, in other words, what we see, the implicit forms of the soul, what we don't see, what might be in other worlds." And the great agent to assist the artist was the myth. So we're going to be looking at some myths now. I know we already looked at Cyclops before, but I wanted to do the eye thing. And we're going to look at some myths and see the lessons that they have and how the artists interpreted them. The first is Prometheus. Prometheus went up into the sky. You can see the thunderbolts coming out because the gods are not at all pleased. He has stolen fire. The symbol for the fire may be, as some have thought, a symbol of giving humankind consciousness, a conscience, the ability to think, the ability to sin. It's kind of like the Adam and Eve story. Here is Thomas Cole's version of Prometheus Bound. This is part of the punishment for Prometheus for daring to take that fire. As I talk, see if you can find Prometheus Bound. He's part of the Hudson River School, the artist, not Prometheus. And he is really emphasizing here the glorious landscape around the Hudson River Valley. The Hudson River School, the artist, came out to Yosemite and did the same thing. Just these majestic landscapes. If there are people, they are de-emphasized. Have you found Prometheus? He's at the very top of the mountain in the foreground, bound to the rock. You see him? Well, being bound wasn't his only problem, and that is that daily he was having his liver plucked out, which I guess grew back. And in this situation, it was thought that the liver was the center of emotions. I put the word foreshortening down here because I want to point out this magnificent foreshortening that Peter Paul Rubens used. What we're looking at, of course, is, once again, two-dimensional, but it's as if he's popping off the canvas. If you put your hands at both ends of Prometheus, you will see that it's just a very short distance. But what he's able to do with this foreshortening is give you the feeling that it's going back in to the canvas. Well, we've heard a lot about Prometheus lately because of Oppenheimer. In the reviews and on the advertisements, he's called the modern Prometheus who stole fire from the gods and was tortured ever after. Not talking about bringing us consciousness, which we already have, so we already do sin, but because of the ramifications that come from what the atomic bomb can do to humankind. So you see a picture of Oppenheimer here with still another painting of Prometheus. The next artist who works with myths is Gustave Moreau. He was friends with Redon, the one that did the cute Cyclops at the beginning. This quote from him, I think, really gives us a feeling for the symbolists and for artists who are painting far more than the surface of what you see. He said, "I believe neither in what I touch nor what I see. I only believe in what I feel and what I do not see. And solely, I'm sorry, I only believe in what I do not see and solely in what I feel." Here is his masterpiece that it does a myth. It is so incredibly charged. It is so packed, as we talk about sometimes about literature, with information and detail. There's no way I could show it to you on the slideshow. So let's look at a piece of video here explaining the myth.
We're here in the Musée Moreau, the museum dedicated to the art of Gustave Moreau here in Paris. This was once his house, which makes this a very personal experience.
We're looking at a canvas called Jupiter and Semele. And it's a great example of symbolism.
Symbolism is known primarily as a literary movement, but there were also many painters who we describe as symbolists. In the decades just before this, we had Impressionism, and Impressionism was all about what one sees, an experience of the visual world.
And the ephemeral, the momentary.
And the symbolist artists turn inward. Dreams become more important than visual reality. So let's talk about Jupiter and Semele.
Before we begin, I think it's probably good to characterize this canvas as being extraordinarily detailed, overwrought in the extreme.
Here we have Jupiter, king of the gods from ancient Greek and Roman mythology, also known as Zeus. He and a mortal named Semele have been lovers, and they've conceived another god who we'll know as Bacchus.
But Jupiter's wife, Juno, was jealous and suggested to Semele that she ask Jupiter to reveal himself to her fully,
knowing that this will result in Semele's death.
We're seeing that moment.
So we see Semele wide-eyed staring at the magnificence of Jupiter revealed fully in his divinity. Notice he's not sitting on a throne. He's almost striding forward. His eyes too are wide. He's bejeweled even more than I can imagine any figure in Western art like Van Eyck's God in the Ghent altarpiece with gems and pearls covering his body.
Look at the way that the drapes fall below the throne and cascade down almost like a waterfall. And his left arm rests on a lyre, which is generally an attribute of Orpheus or of Apollo. And Moreau suggested that this meant that what we were seeing was not just a god, but a god poet.
Semele's hair flies out to the left, also fitted with jewels and gold and pearls. So we have this powerful story of this inability of human beings to encounter the divine.
But this is only the central story. These gods are surrounded by a multitude of figures on a variety of levels.
In this architecture that seems to have no beginning and no end, no roof, no foundations, and encrusted with vegetation and angels that come out of the shadows.
Just in front of the throne, we see two female figures. The figure on the left holds a bloodied sword. This is death. Opposite her is a woman crowned with thorns, holding a lily. This is pain. Look at that large, dark eagle, and just before him, this lounging figure of Pan, the Greek satyr, who's associated with humanity's untamed side. But if you look closely, on his thigh, there are small figures that are bound to him that seem to be struggling to free themselves. And one can only imagine that this is mankind.
Below, we seem to have a realm of darkness, of magic, of the supernatural. We see a goddess associated with magic. She wears a crown with a moon above her.
And on either bottom corner are sphinxes, and then below a river of blood. This is perhaps the most lushly painted canvas I've ever seen.
You can tell by looking at the surface this has been painted in many layers.
With brilliant jewel-like colors that feel as if they're almost enamel rather than paint.
Everywhere we look, the figures seem filled with melancholy, and I see that especially in the winged figure with his head in his hands, who's said to represent the death of earthly love. If you think about what a painting of a myth was supposed to look like, it was supposed to be able to tell a story very clearly, and that was the academic tradition that Moreau was trained within. And yet, painting this so radically different from the expectations of academic painting.
It's a completely personalized, idiosyncratic reading of mythology that brings together references to Christianity, to Greco-Roman pagan traditions, but also the traditions of Hindu and Buddhism, as well as the ancient religions of Egypt.
The view of reality for the symbolists was one of profound melancholy.
And that idea is so much a part of the last years of the 19th century, the last years of the great empires, this moment when we knew that the modern was becoming dominant.
And this time when the old systems of belief don't work anymore, and artists are finding a personal language to express important ideas.
Here we have a picture from Moreau of Galatea. We met Galatea earlier in this presentation. On the left, you've seen this picture in that presentation where the monster Cyclops is coming out of the forest. He really looks like he's part of the forest. And then on the right, he's more out of the forest. There's a difference in the style between these two. There is more definition in the one on the left. Sometimes on the right, as in Jupiter and Semele, Murrow would scrape the paint off in certain places, like most of this picture, except for the bodies here. It's more similar to this picture of Cyclops on the right. Remember who did that? Well, that was Redon. And Redon is a 19th century and 20th century artist. This is Caravaggio, who worked in the latter 16th and in the first part of the 17th century. He's kind of the bad boy of Western art. He was a thief. He was a murderer. He died in exile under suspicious circumstances, and he was a playboy. He was debauched and following the sort of things of what Bacchus would be about. We just saw mention of Bacchus. So he did a self-portrait as Bacchus with his jaundiced face. On the right, you see another myth that was done by Caravaggio. And this is one where we have Narcissus looking down into the pool. And what do you see looking up? You see the old picture of Narcissus. So what we have here is Baroque. If you think of sometimes the calm and the beauty of Renaissance work, of, for example, Leonardo, the next step is Baroque. That takes that and dramatizes it. So these two are dramatized myths. Shown this picture many times. Before I went on my little trip last spring, I've always believed it's from Bruegel. It's taught as Bruegel in the schools. I know that you might have thought it was Bruegel. They're not sure it is, but let's play it as if it is. Here we have the artist showing us a myth, the myth of the fall of Icarus. But you don't see Icarus at first until you realize he's just fallen from the sky and his legs are splashing in front of that big boat on the right. The myth of Icarus and Daedalus is that Daedalus was able to make wings. He could put them together with feathers and wax. He had some, and he made some for his son. And in the picture on the left, he's pointing to the sky and say, don't go too close to the sun. The wax will melt and the wings will fall apart, as you see here in this fall on the right. Here we have some other versions of the picture. The one on the upper left is exactly the same scene. I have seen it online. The one that I just showed you is the one that I saw in Belgium. Look at Daedalus is flying around up there at the top. I showed you a detail. Well, I have an overactive imagination sometimes. So I took a detail of the one that I saw in Brussels. And isn't there a little V in the spotlight there? It looks kind of like it's Daedalus in my imagination flying around. Well, the moral of this tale is that if you fly too high, you're going to have a great fall. For example, if we talk about somebody with great ambition in the musical Hamilton, the theme of Icarus goes all through that musical, of politicians trying to go beyond themselves with too much ambition and having a fall. This is a fantastic life-size painting of Icarus falling. And I'm not telling the artist, he's a local artist I greatly admire. And he said, I was inspired to make this large painting of Icarus about 5 years ago. This was done in 1995. So he's talking about 1990. Due to a sense that there were increasing problems with the internet that could cause the entire system and the dependent economy to crash. This is long before artificial intelligence. Well, that magnificent artist is David Laguerre. I know that you know of him. Some of you are friends with him. I took a wonderful class, Ollie class, that Brian Taylor did called Conversations with Artists, where David Laguerre was so accessible. When I asked a question, I said, you know, I kind of think of you as the visual Joseph Campbell. Well, he looked happy because his thing is trying to preserve the classics, the ways of thinking that we get from the myths. This painting is called Even in Arcadia, There Am I. Well, this is the same theme as the Son of Man, that having a foot both on earth and beyond earth, having been in this heaven on earth at the same time as being the workaday world. So the illustration of myths is often part of David Laguerre's work. That river winding through it is the Salinas River, and the mountains are the Gabilons and the Lucias, where he lives and where I live. He often uses Monterey County as his background. You see also the tomb there, which is a memento mori. You can see his work locally at the Winfield Gallery that handles it. So it's sort of hit and miss as to what pieces might be out there. By the way, I know that you don't have time to read all of the captions that I put on my slideshow. I'm hoping that perhaps you'll just concentrate on the art and go back for the details on my website. This picture is another part of Greek classics. It is called Still Life with Grape Juice and Sandwiches. He does these still lifes, he does several of them. He sets them up against the background of Monterey Bay. In this one, he is showing the Greek tradition of xenia, which is to give gifts of food to passersby, or perhaps even the poor. Laguerre works from photographs. After he had taken all the photographs, got just what he wanted of this setting, he took the grape juice and the sandwiches to Dorothy's Kitchen in Salinas, where they work with the homeless, the people who need a hand up sometimes. And there was a priest there. This is what he was telling us in the class that I went to. And they kidded. He said, okay, I brought communion for it. I brought the bread and wine. And that brings us to religion, into metaphysics. What is metaphysics? It's just answering that question. Remember the movie Alfie? What's it all about, Alfie? That's what metaphysics is. It's all these different ways we have of trying to figure out, who am I? Where am I going? What's it all about? Before I get going, I know I'm going to be getting into religion, and I'm not insensitive to the role that religion plays in this crazy, chaotic, horrible world that we are in right now. And so when I do mention some religions, I want you to know that I'm not insensitive to it. The idea of metaphysics is expressed so well in this painting, Wander Above a Sea of Fog, where he's looking out into this morass and perhaps contemplating what's it all about. I'm mentioning here a book that I've recommended before called Looking at Mindfulness. It is 25 paintings to change the way you live. Well, I don't know about changing the way you live, but the essays are terrific, by Christophe André, who is a French psychiatrist and works in psychiatric hospital in Paris. This is, I'm not telling you who the artist is. I happen to be wearing a shirt that is based on his art. But he did this wonderful mural. It's worth looking at the video I'm going to post on my website for the explanations. But in general, it is the same question. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? You read it from right to left. We come from the family as a baby. We pluck in the middle as young adults. We pluck the apple and we get consciousness, the ability to run our own lives. On the left, you see an old person clutching his or her ears as if they're like that scream painting that we're going to see in our third class, saying, where are we going? In the back are symbols from Tahiti, where he worked, of pagan gods and far more, like in the Jupiter and Semele that we saw from Moreau. It's very charged. And that artist is Paul Gauguin. Paul Gauguin was a spiritual guy, as he shows in these two self-portraits. He was also a rogue, and he gave up his family in Europe and went to Tahiti and had some more quote-unquote families. But in these two self-portraits, he's showing his pull between being a saint or a sinner. He has a halo in the one on the left, and the temptations of the apple and the snake from Eden. On the right, he's in front of two of his paintings. The one on the left is one of his many crucifixions. This is his yellow crucifixion. They were painted in Brittany, which he went to, thinking it was sort of an exotic sort of a place before he went to Tahiti. And so that's their background. But on the right, he's showing one of his sculptures of pagan gods that he has put into a painting. So he kind of has that pull. They're having right now, you have to rush to see it, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, a show called the Tree and Serpent, Buddhist art from India, which is where the Buddha was from, where natural meets the supernatural. The intertwining between nature and spirituality is a very strong theme throughout religions and beliefs, such as Buddhism, and throughout art. So you see this goddess here of abundance. When she, with her hand on her breast, she is showing abundance, fecundity, and she is wrapped with a lotus flower. There's a peacock on her back. Now here's somebody who's become my new favorite artist of Buddhist works, and that is Sharon Sherpa. Please don't try to read this whole thing that I took a picture of at the Monterey Museum of Art. I'll just summarize. He was born in Nepal. He has this wonderful history of all of the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, such as our Dalai Lama, that go into his psyche and into his art. There's a sort of an art called Thangka that his father practiced and ancestors below. So his art combines this tradition plus his feeling of being, as I've mentioned before, having a foot in the real world. That's what different worlds means. He's a man of two worlds. He goes between Kathmandu and the Bay Area to live. This is fantastic, Skywalker. Here we have what could be a person like you or me that's meditating, being imbued with the Buddhist or the yogi spirit. When we're talking about monsters, demons, all of these symbols that we see all around are part of, are coming into and being absorbed into our main character. On the left, I show some of the kind of a glossary of demons that you see in medieval manuscripts. And then I took some pictures at the Monterey Museum of Art of some of the demons that are in the picture I just showed you. And I think it's kind of amazing, the crossover with Western art and these cute little demons down here. These I love. These are self-portraits. They are a painting with the gold background that makes it like an icon, and a sculpture, both portraits of Sharon Sherpa. What about the bubble gum? What about the underwear? These are one more sign I am in two worlds. I am imbued with the yogi spirit, and I am part of the 21st century. Speaking of bubbles, on the right is my favorite painting when I went to the first time to the Biennale in Venice. And it is two friends blowing bubbles together. I think it's a fantastic thing to do with close friends. They are modern people. This is a modern painting done by Pakistani Imran Qureshi. On the left, you see Islamic Persian art illustrated Persian ministers. Down in the lower left-hand corner, if you go to mosques today, you will not see any figurative work. You will see messages from Muhammad in beautiful calligraphy. And in the middle, you will see these beautiful designs that you see on their tiles. This is quite incredible, again, with the crossover. This is like the ascent of Jesus, like the ascent of people who have not sinned. This is the ascent of Muhammad on this beautiful horse called a Buraq. He's veiled. He's being helped by angels going up there. Has been, the saints and the people that are pictured are Adam and Joseph and Moses and Abraham and Jesus, all crossing over with Christianity. Looking at these two paintings without looking at the caption below, do you recognize the artist? The artist on the left who did the Bible is Vincent van Gogh. He did it at the beginning of his short painting, 10-year painting career. And he was already really doing painterly work. You can see that, but not the bright colors. His father was a parson. He tried being an itinerant preacher among many other different things he tried before devoting himself to art. On the right, The Jew with Torah is by Marc Chagall, a devout Jew who was actually had to leave his native Russia because of the pogroms against the Jews, and has carried that forth in his artwork. If you happen to be going to Nice in the near future, there is a museum that's devoted to Chagall. And one of the cycles that you see there is this fabulous cycle of the biblical message. And I'd like to show a small video there that tells you about this magnificent work that he did there.
The Chagall Museum is nearby. Starting in the 1950s, Marc Chagall painted a cycle of canvases designed for this building. Even if you're suspicious of modern art, this museum, with the largest collection of Chagall's work in captivity, is a delight. 17 biblical scenes make up the nave, or core, of what Chagall called the House of Brotherhood. Each painting is a lighter-than-air collage of images inspired by Chagall's Russian folk village youth, his Jewish heritage, biblical themes, and his feeling that he existed somewhere between heaven and earth. Chagall paints a world that's hidden to the eye, the magical, mystical world below the surface. He blends personal imagery, particularly from his childhood in Russia, the Hasidic Jewish perspective he absorbed as a child. That's the idea that God's everywhere, in nature, animals, and everyday things. Gravity-defying compositions, with lovers, animals, and angels twirling blissfully in midair. and childlike simplicity. Simple, heavy outlines, often spilling over with Crayola colors. Chagall saw the Bible as a synonym for nature. His brilliant blues and reds celebrate nature and its creator. His couples are enchanting. To Chagall, humans loving each other mirrored God's love of creation. He wrote, in art as well as in life, anything is possible, provided there is love.
Michelangelo put the entire Bible on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It was created over 4 years when he was in his late 30s. I was lucky enough to go to San Jose, where they had the Michelangelo Sistine Chapel experience. I know that many of you have gone to see the Sistine Chapel in person. Probably today people are using their Zoom cameras to see the detail. When I first saw it in the early 60s, we would hold a mirror in our hand and try to see what was up on the ceiling. But this show has the images life-size at your own level. It's really fantastic. What do I mean by putting the whole Bible on the ceiling? Well, if you look at the center row here, reading from right to left, where it says God divides light from darkness, you will see that he tells the story of Genesis, goes toward God creating Adam. That's not God creating everything, because in the center is God creates Eve. Going to Noah, drunk and disgraced. But all around there are other Bible stories from the Old Testament. And then there are different stories and different pictures that talk about the whole ancestors of Jesus. So it is the entire Bible on the ceiling. On the left is God divides light from darkness. On the right, Noah drunk and disgraced. I'm wondering if you see a difference in styles, in the way that Michelangelo portrayed. And I wonder if you can guess which was painted first. Well, the one that was painted first was Noah. It is much more detailed. And if you follow the history of art, that's what has happened, is that we've gone from more detail to less. The one on the left is almost surrealistic looking, with that light circling down. It's more dramatic, it's more abstract. At the other end of the Sistine Chapel is his Last Judgment. I talked before about how Last Judgments are words to the parishioners who would have seen it. Of course, these days it's the people who are choosing the Pope. They don't need this lesson, but regular parishioners would look at the left of it and see the people that Jesus is motioning can go to heaven because they have followed the tenets of the church. On the right, all the people are being dragged down into the fires of hell. They are going to be met by some of the monsters that we've looked at before. Michelangelo did this now in his 60s after having completed the chapel in his 30s. So on the left, you see the people that are in hell. And on the right, much later, slightly different style, you have the, not from the hell, but from what pictures we saw before, people who the angels are helping them up into heaven, the ascension. Well, here's another ascension. I wonder if any of you, this is a trick question, don't get mad at me. What surrealist painted this ascension? There they are, getting sucked into that vortex. They're going to go up to heaven. That's my favorite painter, as I've admitted before, Hieronymus Bosch. We know him from Garden of Earthly Delights, which is a triptych. This has 4 panels. You see people on earth and people on hell on the left, but in the right panel, there's that vortex I was talking about, the people that will ascend into heaven. El Greco showed us an ascension in this incredible picture. Down below, you see the Count Orgaz. I hope you can see between the two people in gold. According to the legend, those are St. Augustine and St. Stephen, who have come down from heaven, who are bearing the Count. You can see his face in front of the guy in gold there with the mitre. Beyond these, you see this row of important people. You can tell they're important by the size of their collars. If you look right up from the mitre on the guy on the left, you'll see to the left of that big hat, a man with a beard, and you see his hand. Above his hand is a self-portrait of El Greco, our artist. He has the most light on his face there. He's looking out at us. He was called El Greco because the Spanish, I think, gave up trying to pronounce his Greek name. He was from Greece. As you look at the top part of the painting is the Ascension. You see Mary, St. John the Baptist here, framing down below an angel. And within that diaphanous cloth that she has, there's what looks like a small baby. That is the soul of Count of Orgaz going to heaven. Giotto did the same thing. This is on the Church of St. Francis in Assisi, where he did the whole life and death of St. Francis. You see St. Francis laid out for his burial below in his Franciscan robes. You see him being lamented by fellow monks. You see up above the coterie of important people who are around. And in that cloud is the face of St. Francis. If you see it in the detail on the right, you're a much better seer than I'm going to show you the detail in a second. I saw one person's head was shaking no. Let's look. See it a little bit better, maybe close up. And then on the right, look at the cloud, how it sweeps up from the left to the right. At the very end of the cloud is the profile of St. Francis. It has its eyes closed, it has a very sharp nose, and its mouth is clenched. Here is an angel in a descending posture that I found at the Monterey Museum of Art, the third of these sort of spiritual shows that are going on right now. It's a marvelous photograph. That drapery is worthy of Botticelli. I mean, it's gorgeously done if it were done in paint, but it was photographed underwater. You can see the pool picture on the right side of the painting. The one on the right is called Apparition. Now, we probably don't see an apparition. I don't think the artist, the photographer, saw an apparition. But this is the theme of the show. These are photographs and artworks of those glimpses we have every day, like from the smile of a baby or a sunset, or maybe the red on the head of a hummingbird. Those glimpses, those moments that say, you know, there's kind of something special out there. And this is ascending toward an apparition of that moment of something special. Okay, talk about overactive imaginations. When we left the show, I looked up in the sky and I saw a Magritte cloud with my little eye, but much smaller than Magritte's. My friend joined me and I said, do you see that profile? And I was thrilled to pieces that she did. We have a cute little pug-nosed guy there, mouth wide open, smoke coming out, and that eye up above on the right-hand side of that cloud, bringing us back to reality. Well, not really reality, it's just Renee's mind. So we end where we started. Is this the painting you looked at the very beginning? Do you see the artist, Luis Barbacantos? Do you see the year that it was painted, 2018? You do see Alexander the Great. You do see Apelles and the lovely Campaspe. On the right, you do see the money changers. But look at the art. You see Van Gogh's sunflowers. You see Picasso's Demoiselle d'Avignon, the nude ladies at the top. And Mona Lisa looks like she's underwater. So this is not exactly the painting we saw at the very beginning. It is a takeoff. The one on the left is what you saw at the very beginning. The one on the right isn't. So this is the ever-changing world of art. And I hope you'll come back next week when we're going to talk about the ever-changing world of art. I'll talk to you about some more of the museums that I visited and about how all of these change and stay the same. In the meantime, go on the website. You can talk to me about anything there. Thank you so much.